Hello and welcome to The Drum. I'm Steve Cannane. Coming up, will the Malaysian solution stop the boats? Why Bill Gates cares about Wayne Swan's budget? And did waterboarding lead the US to Bin Laden? A military interrogator who helped track down al-Qaeda figures in Iraq gives us his views. Our panel tonight, Jessica Brown from the Centre for Independent Studies, David Hetherington from the think tank Per Capita, and in Melbourne, James Paterson from the Institute of Public Affairs. First tonight to some breaking news, some breaking budget news. The Treasurer has revealed another change to the requirements for the long-term unemployed, aimed at getting them off welfare and into work. To explain, we're joined by political editor Lyndall Curtis in Canberra. And Lyndall, what's the latest?
Well, we understand that the Treasurer will announce tomorrow night that for the very long-term unemployed, that's people who've been unemployed for more than 2 years, there's about 230,000 of them, they'll face tougher requirements for getting work experience or training or doing work for the dole programs. At the moment, they have to work 2 days a week for 6 months of the year. That, we understand, will be extended to 2 days a week for 11 months of the year. This is all part of the government's push in the budget to get more people into work or get trained ready for work to help ease some of the labour pressures that are already emerging as the commodities boom continues.
Lyndall, thanks for that, and I hope there is some more stories for you left in the budget tomorrow night. Seems like a lot of it has leaked out already.
I'm sure there'll be plenty for us.
OK, thank you, Lyndall. Lyndall Curtis, our political editor there. Jessica, this is an area you cover a bit in your research. What do you make of those announcements?
Yeah, look, I think it's probably a move in the right direction. One thing we do know is that we haven't really made much progress on long-term unemployment. Even when the jobless rate's been falling, there's a sort of rump of long-term unemployed who haven't been getting into work. My concern with this, though, is as a budget measure, I can't really see how it's going to save a lot of money in this budget. Programs that are needed to especially help people that have a lot of trouble getting into work can be quite expensive. They're worth doing, and in the long term, it's a good policy solution, but I don't think it's saving a lot of money as a budget measure. OK, well, let's move on to the other big political story, and it's already being dubbed the Malaysian solution. And Labor's plan to send asylum seekers arriving here to detention centres there have been attacked by both the right and the left. As part of the agreement, Australia would accept 4,000 refugees who've had their claims processed in Malaysia. Julia Gillard says it's aimed at stopping people smugglers from sending more boats.
We are intending to take a fairly tough approach to ensuring that we send a message to people smugglers right up the pipeline that they can no longer say to people that they can get them to Australia. If you get on a boat, then the risk you run is that you end up in Malaysia, and I'm not going to put any conditions or caveats on that.
The federal opposition has labelled the idea panicked, desperate and policy on the run. And Green Senator Sarah Hanson-Young says it's an appalling proposal that will dump vulnerable people into a country with a poor record on human rights.
The question that I have for the government is where is their legal advice as to the legalities of their plan? We know that it breaches international law, and there is a big question mark over whether it may indeed breach the government's own Migration Act.
The Greens have raised the possibility that they'll challenge any laws introduced into Parliament to enforce the policy, but the Prime Minister says the government has received legal advice that no legislation would be required. So will it work? James Paterson, what do you think?
Well, that's a very good question, Steve. I think people are probably pretty rightly sceptical, given this government's record in this area, that it will work. And I have to say it's a pretty elaborate and extreme kind of plan. And I think perhaps the reason that they've gone for such an elaborate and odd sort of plan is because they're desperate to be seen to be doing something tough, but not something that's the same as John Howard's policy, because they know the political damage that would do to them if they adopted that. So it is an open question whether this will work, but it certainly is a bizarre construction of a scheme. And look, I don't have any great confidence in it myself.
David, could it stop asylum seekers getting on boats and coming to Australia?
I think in the short term, yes. I mean, the point is that there's a deterrent here. So if you're more likely to be turned around and sent back to Malaysia, you're more likely to get on a boat. The problem with the policy design is that they've said 800 people will fall under this scheme. So the question is, what happens to the people after?
What happens when there's yeah?
I'd think about randomising it, so you don't know, whether you're in the first 800 or not. I actually think the bigger question, though, is whether it works in political terms, because this is a political problem rather than a policy problem. It overcomes the queue jumping issue, because now we've got a queue that is seen to have some order. It overcomes the fact that we've got unapproved asylum seekers arriving rather than approved refugees, as will now be coming under the Malaysian plan. I guess one of the open questions is the UN context. Malaysia is not a signatory of the Convention for Refugees. The UN